Howdy everyone, it's the fourth judge here, and today we're going to go through UFC 330 this weekend, which we have Garry versus Islam Makhachev, and the co-main event, so that is for the welterweight championship. We have a co-main event for the strawweight championship, which is Mackenzie Dern versus Jillian Robertson 2. So let's get into it. So first up, quick recap of last week. Man, new age of lightweight. We saw Quillen Southfield run through Mateusz Gamrot. First round sub, very, very impressive. What do you think about this one?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I mean, I think that was kind of what we were saying, where it was going to show what kind of fighter Southfield is and is going to be. And I think that showed us what we were looking for. You know, I don't think that was a fluke win by any means. He looked super dominant. He beat Gamrot in a position that everybody was like, Southkid has to watch out for the ground game. So I think that just kind of solidified what we thought was possible, and now we know is 100% possible.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, leading on to that, Aussie train keeps rolling, man. Whitaker looking solid in his light heavyweight debut. Volk back as champ. Southkild's on a run. Poor JDM, man. Just a stinker. And then a little meme to lead us into our first fight. A real man never speaks ill of the caveman. So let's get into the fights, guys. First up, we've got Jeremiah Wells versus Myktybek Orolbai, the caveman. If you've been around the sport for I guess he's been in for about 2 years now. If you've been around, you know the caveman. He has a very distinct look about him. He looks like the caveman from Night at the Museum. I know that because my son watches it about every day. But nonetheless, I don't really know why he's fighting Jeremiah Wells. He has only lost to Matus Rebecki, and that was by split decision. So I think this is way above him, and the odds kind of reflect that. Like, Jeremiah Wells does have power, but the only good win he has is he beat a really crappy Thimba Grimbo, which has really fallen off here the past year or so. So I'm taking Myktybek Orolbai, easy win. Maybe it's a decision, he goes out, or maybe it's a sub, but one of the two. What do you think, man?
Yeah, I agree with you completely. This is just kind of Wells fighting way up what he should be. I'm kind of seeing this as an Orolbai. You know, he's got a great kind of I don't want to say ground game in like the jiu-jitsu sense. You know, he does
like
have subs under his belt.
But
like his wrestling heavy is just crazy, super crazy top control.
So strong.
8.8 takedowns in per 15 with a 60% accuracy. Like, I mean, 8.8 per 15 is that's some of these fighters in this weight class like hold takedowns in their career. So it just shows you that this dude is going to grab a hold of him, and it should be a pretty easy night for Orolbai.
Yep, 100%, man. And with that Uros win happening and that aging so well, him beating Medic like a year ago, I believe, he should get a jump up after this. But nonetheless, let's move on to our next one. We have the GOAT, Neil Magny versus Ramiz Brahimaj. So let me give a little background on Neil Magny. He's a very special fighter to us. It always seems like we always find a really good bet line on him, some delusional bet line where he's fighting a guy like Ramiz Brahimaj, where he's a mediocre welterweight. Yeah, welterweight, correct? A mediocre welterweight, and Neil Magny always finds a way to get it done. I don't know how, he just does it. So I'm just going with him on this one. I'm going to believe that he can get it done again. And I'm probably leaning a decision. I think there's maybe a 5% chance for a ground and pound TKO. Now, I will say, I'm giving Ramiz like a 40% chance to win. And I know his biggest strengths are the guillotines, and Magny's been caught in neck stuff before. But the thing is Ramiz is a little bit shorter than Magny. I believe he's 5 inches shorter than Magny, so that's gonna be some issues to jump a guillotine on him. I think Magny's gonna get this done, school him over 3 rounds, or school him. I think he's gonna win this, maybe 29-28, maybe 30-27. What do you think, man?
Yeah, this one was kind of like you were saying. I was going back and forth on this one because Magny is one of those people where we've talked about it before. He's kind of, he should win this one, no problem, and then gets like starched in 60 seconds, or will like go out and beat an up and comer, prospect who's ranked 4 or something like that. I'm kind of 50-50 on this one. Magny's gonna be the much bigger guy going into this fight. Obviously has the experience, kind of addition on his side. He has like more wins than Ramirez has, or Ramiz has in like basically his entire career. So this one I think is going to, again, kind of come down to one of those where it's like, is this going to end earlier or later? Magny is always one of those people who's like always in the fight. It almost seems to do better as the fight goes on. So this one I'm pretty split on. I don't know if I necessarily want to take one way or the other. I'm just hoping for a good fight out of I like Magny personally. So I'll pick him just as like a, hey, I want him to win kind of pick, but I don't know if I really see this one going one way or another.
Yeah, I think Magny's gonna pull it out just because he's craftier and taller. But I'm with you. It's a very close fight, I think. So next up, we got Rafael Tobias versus Lucas Fernando. So this is at light heavyweight. I don't know a whole lot about both of you guys. I mean, I've seen Rafael Tobias fight, and then I watched a little bit of film on Fernando, and I'm just gonna kind of. I don't feel comfortable with the amount of film I've seen on Fernando. Now, I've heard good things about his last two opponents, and he seemed to have finished those guys. Or handled them pretty easily. Yeah, finished them both in the first round. So I'm going to lean with him. I don't think Tobias is that good at all. So that's kind of what I'm going with here. Outside of that, I don't have too much of a breakdown. I think that Fernando is just a good striker and a powerful striker, whether it be by leg kicks or by punches. What do you think, man?
Yeah, I'm kind of agreeing here. Lucas is coming from LFA, so it's not, that is one of those organizations where it's not just, oh, he's new to the UFC. Like, obviously, LFA competition isn't the same as UFC, but it's a legit organization to where he's not fighting full-blown garbage cans that are, 55 years old. And really, when I look at the film, Tobias basically is like kind of one-trick pony. He's good on the ground. He has some stopping power and that kind of stuff, but this fight is basically going to be he wants to go to the ground. His submission game is good. And I think Fernando he's not going to beat him on the ground per se, but he has decent takedown defense. He's going to be a little bit bigger, so that's going to be on his side as well, trying to stuff takedowns. He's not completely dead in the water when it goes to the ground either. And like you said, Fernando is just stronger when it comes to leg kicks and punches and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I got to ride with the debut here. I think that it's probably going to be an earlier finish on Fernando's side. If it goes to the decision, then I could see Tobias maybe pulling out 2 rounds just because of like control time kind of thing.
Maybe. I disagree in the sense that I think Fernando's the one that can survive the distance because he has more decisions in his career. But it's like, when you're talking about this experience, you really can't tell. You know what I'm saying? It's like you're really just throwing stuff in the air. But nonetheless, next up, we've got Vicente Luque versus Tyesean Gore. Yeah, man, I think we're watching the death of Vicente Luque here, man. I mean, by no means do I think Tyesean Gore is that good. And I do think Luque coming off of that Gastelum win kind of throws it off a little bit. But I think Luque is far, far past his prime. I think he is kind of exiting. I'm not letting this fluke win over Gastelum count. And even then, it's like Gastelum is a paper bag now. So I'm probably going to go Gore guillotine choke. He loves to jump those guillotines. Like we were talking about earlier this week, he does have power, so I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe he can catch him. I don't think Luque's chin is near at all what it used to be. But I'm expecting somewhat of kind of a guillotine choke finish, probably round 2, round 3, especially as Luque gets tired. It seems like gas tank is gone. What do you think, man?
I'm going to have to stick with Luque on this one. Luque was one of the guys that got me into the UFC as hard as I am, nowadays. And yes, he is. He's not the Luque of his prime that I kind of, I love tuning in and watching. But for the age that he is, which, he's not 40, he's only 34, but he's one of those a lot of fight miles under his belt. But he doesn't fight bad considering all of that stuff. His cardio is still pretty decent. Like you said, he's a little bit more chinny nowadays than he was back in the day. But he's got good ground game. He has, good submissions. He has more KOs. He has more significant strikes per minute, and he absorbs less. Gore's side, he has 7.5 significant strikes per minute absorbed. So he's going to get hit a bunch. So it's like, as long as Luque doesn't just kind of fall into a submission for Gore, I think that Luque kind of beats Gore in all aspects here. I think the only way that Luque is going to lose this one is if he kind of puts himself in that losing position.
Yeah. Or now I will say, Gore does have a chin. We've seen him get hit with bombs. Like Tulio had to kill him in there before he TKO'd him. So I will say that, but I can see what you're saying. Like in terms of a ground game and submission attempts, 100% give the advantage to Luque. But nonetheless, let's move on. Next up, we got mini-man Donte Johnson versus Eric McConico. So Donte Johnson, I remember his Contender Series fight. I believe it was like heavyweight or something like that, like something ridiculous. And he looked, like a midget. It was very shocking. And he looked fast. That's the thing about heavyweight is like, as long as you're not just a plotter, and can move your head, you can have some success. And it was like, whoa, this guy's fun. Looking back on his fights now, just from name value, you'd kind of lean like, oh, Donte Johnson should probably get Eric McConico out of there. But looking back at their fights, it's like, I don't think Donte Johnson's a minus 230 over McConico. I think Johnson might have more power, but me and you have both watched almost all of McConico's fight together, and we've seen him take bombs. I'm not saying that he's fought the hardest hitters, but Suzurakiev, Kamzat's teammate, he had to really lay it on before he finally got him out of there in the third round. So, and with how sloppy Johnson is, I think McConico can capitalize on that. So, part of me is wanting to pick McConico, but then there always is that power of Donte Johnson. And I think he's gotten enough critique, and he's lucky enough to get by 2 easy wins against mediocre guys, that he's going to come into this one a little bit more head movement, dodge the shots, and probably still get this done. Probably round 1, round 2 TKO. But I would not be surprised to see McConico pull this out, a 3-round decision. What do you think, man?
Yeah, I'm pretty much agreeing with you completely here. I have this one kind of down as like a Johnson round 1, maybe early round 2 TKO. As it goes as it goes longer, it kind of edges more to McConico's side. Obviously Johnson's going to be a little bit of the smaller guy, but is crazy powerful and explosive for when he's fighting. His striking is kind of basic, even though that's like what he likes to do a lot. He's more just like KO power than he is like a boxer necessarily. Where McConico, you could argue, is maybe a little bit more well-rounded with wins kind of across the board of, TKO, subs, decisions, all of that. McConico will be the older guy coming into this, I think maybe by 8 or 9 years. So, going to lose that kind of explosive step just in that age, and then going against someone like Johnson, who's explosive anyway, is going to be a little bit of an issue. So, yeah, I kind of saw this one as like, I'll say, round 1.5 or before is probably Johnson, and then maybe 1.5 and over starts to lean more McConico. But I'm not going to necessarily say that if it goes into the round 2, McConico wins, because Johnson is still going to be the younger guy, probably still going to have better cardio, so he easily could take 2 rounds on the scorecard.
Yeah, the big thing to me is has Johnson improved that sloppiness, that kind of laziness he's shown in the striking department out of his last 2 fights, right? Is he not just relying just on that, I'm going to hit you harder than you hit me? But exactly. Nonetheless, let's move on to the next one. Next up, we have Jalin Turner versus Kaue Fernandes. Yeah, so I'm interested in this one. I think this is an interesting one. I've seen a lot of discussion on it about online. I've seen a lot of people kind of discuss how, so Fernandes' last win was against Harry Hardwick, and if you guys remember that, he just leg kicked him to death and got him out of there in the first round. I think Fernandes is a solid, but I don't think he's at the level of Jalin Turner. He struggled with Kutaladze, who was pretty solid, and I think Turner, as long as he comes in and fights like he did against Barboza, and not how he did against Moicano and Bahamondes, the Jalin Turner, not necessarily the super young Jalin Turner, but the long striker, not getting discouraged if he takes a hit or anything. He stays in there, keeps his distance. I think he can win a decision easily. Maybe if he can get Fernandes a little amped, which I'm not necessarily sure Fernandes will do that, given I've only seen a couple fights of him. I think Turner could potentially get a TKO here, whether it be in round 1, round 2, but I'm leaning more so towards a Jalin Turner decision. What do you think, man?
Yeah, I'm kind of, this is another one where I'm kind of 50-50 on. I will say that I kind of lean more Turner here. but I am kind of in the center. I think that this is going to be can Turner stay at the distance and kind of fight the way that he wants to fight? And is the good Jalin Turner that we know, is he the one coming to, is he the one coming to fight this time? Fernandes, obviously, like you said, some mean low kicks. Being the longer guy, Jalin is going to have the longer reach. So Fernandes is going to kind of invest in those leg kicks early,
now,
try to slow
really
him down.
Quick, only 2.5-inch reach advantage, but 5-inch height advantage for Jalin.
Exactly. So those, even though the reach isn't a massive difference, that height with shorter reach is going to kind of compound. So I think we're going to see Fernandes invest in some leg kicks a little bit more than he has, maybe not as much as he did in the Hardwick fight.
Yeah, but the Hardwick fight was goofy. But yes.
But more than he has in some of the other fights, maybe. Just kind of in the idea to slow Turner down. The cardio and that kind of stuff, I think I favor Fernandes, but you can't get rid of the Turner KO power either. So I'm leaning personally a Turner round 1 or 2 TKO, probably around 1. That's when he gets his best work done. And I think that distance is really just going to play a factor in the first round here.
Yep. 100%. Yeah, and I have in tiny notes down here at the bottom of my book. Jalin could be washed though, so that's the only concern. Literally, who's showing up? But next up, we have a short notice. We have Chidi Njokuani versus Joel Alvarez. So at first, I believe this was supposed to be Jeff Neal, and I think it was about 2 weeks ago or so. I believe Joel Alvarez, the rumors came out, or not rumors, Islam even talked about it. He was helping Islam prepare for potentially a fight with Ilia Topuria. And Joel Alvarez, we've seen, we love his striking. So that made sense. So I think he's not coming in here, off the couch. Maybe stamina, the gas tank's a little crappy. I think he's coming in here freshly trained, doing well. Something that surprised me is Joel Alvarez is 4 years older than Chidi. But Chidi has the 3-inch reach advantage. That was my notes. They're about the same height. But if we just look at their records and just kind of look at the fighter they are, Chidi's losing a decision to Carlos Leal. I love my little steroid-looking freak, Carlos Leal, but he is not good at all. And I think Joel Alvarez is a whole nother step above that. I think that Amazov fight is going to loss is going to age well for him. I think Amazov is going to make it to the top of the division. It was just a nasty finish that everyone remembers it. Outside of that, he was on a roll. He was handling guys pretty easily, handling Drakkar close, which we then saw close, handling Edson Barboza easily, getting him out of there, and then also handling Luque before he fell off into immortal hell. But nonetheless, I'm going with Joel Alvarez here. I'm leaning. If it touches the ground, I'm leaning a sub. I don't think he's going to take Chidi down in any way, but if it goes to the ground, I think he has a good ground game. But outside of that, I'm going with a KO TKO for Joel Alvarez. What do you think?
Yeah, I was kind of looking at an early sub on the Alvarez side. One of the things that you said that I want to fix, Joel is the younger fighter here.
Oh, he is.
I believe you said that Joel was the older, but yeah, he is the younger by 4 years, I think. I have Joel down as 33.
I must have written that backwards, my bad.
And I kind of agree with everything you're saying there, though, where it's honestly kind of a big step up. Chidi he has really good clinch work, real good body work and as well. He comes with a kind of a traditional Muay Thai base. Like, you can tell that he was a Muay Thai fighter kind of before he transitioned to that MMA. But Joel's not a slump when it comes to the boxing either. So it's not like he's going to be scared of someone who has a traditional Muay Thai kind of background. And I just see this kind of being more as Alvarez is going to want to take the fight to the ground. He has 17 sub wins. He feels confident on the ground. And I think if you're coming in at short notice, like you said, he was training, so it's not like they just called him off the couch and he showed up. But if you are coming at a little bit of a short notice, I think getting the fight to the ground kind of in your wheelhouse as fast as you can and maybe looking for a sub when they're still dry is going to be the best kind of, method of victory for Alvarez here.
Yeah, the only concern I have about that is his takedown defense. That it would have to get to the ground. I don't think he can take Chidi down per se. He doesn't have great takedown defense. But I think I 100% agree. If it does get to the ground, somehow from a clinch or something, yeah, I'm loving the odds for a sub by Joel Alvarez. But next up, we have Edson Barboza versus Esteban Ribovics. So since the order has changed, is this the prelim main event still? or is this the current jerker?
I want to say that the Chidi fight might be the first on the main card.
What? Really? Have we gone through that many? Wow. But nonetheless, yeah, let's get into this. Edson Barboza, the old man, getting fed to Esteban Ribovics. Yeah, I mean, I think this is good for Ribovics, coming off that rough Gamrot loss sub. And then Barboza is just getting the snot beat out of him, man. You know, loses to Murphy. That wasn't a great fight from Murphy. That close fight took a beating, man. Got wobbled multiple times. I think Close got wobbled a couple times too, but nonetheless, yeah, Barboza took a beating. And then getting slimed out by Turner. So I think this is, you know, leaning towards like a KO TKO round one for Ribovics. I think the odds are correct. I think it's time for Barboza to get out of the game and retire into the sunset. What do you think, man?
Yeah, first I was wrong on that one. You're right. Barboza is the first one on the main card.
Gotcha. Okay.
But yeah, this one was one of the ones that was kind of hard for me too. You know, I love Barboza just as a fighter. You know, loved watching his fights, and it's one of those like kind of getting close to taking the dog around the back of the barn kind of thing.
Yep.
You know, it sucks to kind of see, but you know, Edson still is dangerous earlier. You know, his kicks and his KO power is still there early, kind of when he's fresh round one. But really, I think that's about the only time that he really has anything for someone is if it's like the first 3-4 minutes of the fight, he has some of that power. But it's gone as it kind of goes into that second round. So I think that this is looking more kind of like maybe very end of round one or round two, Esteban KO TKO kind of win. You know, also very good on the ground. You know, already has more subs than Barboza did. Barboza has twice as many fights under his belt. So I think that this is a pretty good fight for Esteban. I think this is another really good stepping stone too. You know, Barboza, like we're saying, is kind of on the way out, but has some name power still. So I think that this win, I think Esteban's going to come in thinking, hey, I want to get a finish over someone who has good name pool in the UFC to kind of catapult myself up the rankings a little bit more.
Just get back on that win streak. Get back to looking good. Recover from the Gamrot loss. I completely agree, man. But yeah, next up, we've got Mansur Abdul-Malik versus Dustin Stoltzfus. So this one we were talking about this week. I think they could probably shoot Mansur Abdul-Malik in the middle of the cage, and if he fell over, he'd probably still KO TKO Dustin Stoltzfus. You're losing to Kelvin Gastelum in 2025, man. You know, get out of the game. We're done. You know, I think Mansur Abdul-Malik, yeah, definitely he took a little, you know, whatever you want to call it, the kids call it, war loss today. The hype train kind of got derailed with that Belgadri fight, but that was bound to happen to one of them. They're both solid prospects coming in there, more so Belgadri than I think him. I know I'm pronouncing that name wrong, but nonetheless, I think Dustin Stoltzfus is nowhere near an Abdul-Malik. Maybe a young Stoltzfus could find a crafty way to get it done, but in this case, at his age, no shot. I will say, Dustin is only 34, so I'm kind of hating on him like he's 40. But Abdul is holding a 5-inch reach advantage. You know, I don't really see a way for Dustin to win this, and I also want to mention Dustin lost to Gerald Meerschaert. Boo! But yeah, man, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm definitely right there with you with Malik's side here. You know, like you said, he's going to be the bigger, stronger, the faster, the younger fighter. Kind of all of that stuff is in his realm. You know, I guess if I need to start playing devil's advocate, you know, Dustin has more experience. He has a ground game, has more submissions. But when you start to go, you know, I was trying to kind of find that, you know, I like to have an argument from both sides, and I'm like, you know what? The only thing I can really argue is Dustin has some submissions in a ground game.
Yep.
And then you look at Malik holding like a 90% takedown defense.
Yep.
So it's like, all right, well, is he even going to go to the ground? You know, so I kind of agree with you on this one where, you know, Dustin has shown that he can be stopped. You know, I think he's 3-7 in the UFC, so it's not like he's a crazy winning record of the UFC where he's been fighting top prospects or nothing like that. Yeah, I think that this is just going to be coming down to Malik's power. You know, his striking technicality maybe isn't up to par. I would love to see kind of as he advances him to get a little bit more crisp in his boxing. I think he just relies on that power a little bit too much right now, but so do a lot of the younger fighters that have that KO power. You know, they rely on that until they can't anymore, and then they have to start becoming a little bit more crafty. And I would just like to see him kind of learn that a little bit before he goes on, you know, a 2 or 3 fight losing in his record. But yeah, I agree completely. I think that this is just going to be a Malik kind of domination, probably round 1 KO.
Yep, 100%. Next up, we've got Charles Johnson versus Jose Ochoa. So yeah, I have noted here, I mean, I think Charles Johnson is the better fighter all around. I think he's a little bit better. I think maybe Jose Ochoa carries a little bit more power, but man, Charles Johnson can put you down, put you out. But overall, he just loses to guys like these. He'll have some good wins, but then he'll get a hard-nosed guy that just won't quit, like a Asu Amalbiev. Now, given Asu was just so great on the ground, or like an Alex Perez, where, actually, that's not a good example, because Perez kind of just caught him there early. But we've seen this before, where he loses to a guy that's not horrible, mediocre, not one of the top guys, and he just can't get it done. He can't put on that KO performance or something along those guys. The guy's just staying in there, being gritty, and just toughing it out. So I'm going to go with, a round 2, round 3 KO, TKO for Ochoa or decision. I think Johnson's best opportunity is probably going to be in round 1, round 2 to clip him and then make it tough from there. But in this case, I think it's going to be an easy day for Ochoa. Now, the only thing I do want to mention is Ochoa is from Shootbox, and they just had, Alan Nascimento, we mentioned it last week, pass away, and that did affect a lot of the guys there. So as long as everything's fine mentally, I think he's going to have not an easy time. I think he's going to be able to get this done against Johnson. It might be a little gritty, but I think he has the grit. But yeah, I think he's going to be able to get this done. What do you think, man?
Yeah, this is another one where I was kind of first digging into it. I was like, man, this is a pretty close fight, and I still kind of stand by that thought. As the week kind of went on, I was doing a little bit more digging and stuff. I did start to go with more of the Ochoa side, and I think that kind of agreeing with everything you said, where they're both almost similar in the aspect of, like, I don't necessarily see either one of these guys like shooting for takedowns and want to wrestle for 15 minutes. Ochoa is going to be the younger guy. He's going to be a little bit of the smaller guy, but will be younger, will be a little bit more explosive. I think that this is just going to kind of come down to one of those, like you said, a Johnson fight where he's just good enough to kind of always be in the conversation, but will lose to someone who maybe he shouldn't because of the experience that Johnson has. And I just think that this is going to kind of come down to an Ochoa, kind of like you're saying, where he's going to kind of outbox him, KO, TKO. Johnson, I kind of agreed with what you're saying, where towards round 1, maybe beginning around 2 is going to be Johnson's best opportunity. But Johnson's also kind of known as a slower starter.
Yes.
So as you start to think, okay, well, round 1's probably going to be one of his better shots here, you go, well, he's never great in round 1 anyway. So you start to kind of lean more Ochoa as you dig into it a little bit more. So I'm agreeing with you in this one. I think maybe a round 2 or 3 TKO for Ochoa or a decision for Ochoa. But I kind of see this being scorecards on Ochoa's side the entire night.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I'm leaning scorecards too. But nonetheless, let's get into our co-main event. So I think I made a little goof at the beginning. This is their first time meeting. I don't know why I said Dern versus Robinson too. But nonetheless, this is for the strawweight championship. Essentially, who's going to be holding it until Zhang Wei Li comes back, in my opinion. The first thing I have is, yeah, man, I don't care. Belt holder for Zhang. Whatever. But nonetheless, let's actually get into it. Jillian is good on ground. I think she's a solid women's fighter. She's okay stand-up too. But overall, I don't think she's at the level of Dern. I think Dern, very slowly, and by no means do I think she's a good striker. I think she's been improving her striking so that it's not a huge vulnerability. And her ground game has always been elite. It's always been elite. And I think her fight IQ is just getting better, which is crazy to say because she started out dumb as bricks. Sometimes you're like, you're winning this fight. What are you doing trying to stand up and throw with her? You don't see her do that as much, or if she does, she's doing it very cautiously in the realm she knows how to strike. So I think this is going to be an easy night in the park for Dern, or easy night in the park. I think she's going to be able to get done. I'm leaning towards either a sub or a decision. I think Jillian's really her best place to get her is probably going to be by TKO, and I don't really see Jillian Robertson TKOing Mackenzie Dern. I think it would be a lucky shot, but, I really don't see it. I'm going with Dern here. What do you think, man?
Yeah, I'm agreeing. I completely agree with what you're saying, where Wei Li, I think, is worlds better than both of these girls fighting for the championship right now. But kind of agreeing with everything you said there. Dern, her striking has gotten better in the past, 4 or 5 fights. It was god awful when she kind of first came in. Robinson is going to have the edge in wrestling specifically. Her grappling and wrestling is better than Dern's for sure. Dern is going to be better on the feet, which is crazy to say, and is better at pure jiu-jitsu as well. So I think this is going to come down to can Dern or does Dern want to keep this standing? I don't know if she can really protect herself from a takedown defense from Robinson, or does she even want to because she feels confident on the ground with her jiu-jitsu. But Dern is going to be better on the feet and better in jiu-jitsu kind of submission game. The only way that I can see Jillian taking this would be, like you said, maybe a random punch kind of clips, and then maybe almost like a ground and pound because her wrestling and top control is really good. If she wins a decision, I think that this will be just a go to sleep and wake up for Islam fight 25 minutes because Jillian's just laying in top control, and that's how she would win a decision. But if it goes to decision, I gotta lean Dern because of her striking is going to be better, submission attempts is going to be better. But if I was putting money on this, I'm going to go Dern by submission. I think that she probably will let Jillian take her down at some point, and then just fish for a triangle or something like that, or an armbar from bottom.
Yeah, 100%, man. And God, please don't let this be a 25-minute bore fest, because then we're getting into another potential 25-minute bore fest right after that. But yeah, let's get into our main event, man. Islam Makhachev, the welterweight king, versus Ian Machado Garry, my cornball Irishman. So, as you guys know, man, I've got to advocate for Garry, man. He's Irish, bro. I can't just be a flaky fan and be like, well, he's a cornball. I can't. No, man, he's still Irish. I got to stick with my dog. So, I pray to God. I don't know, man. I pray one of those head kicks hit. I really don't see, maybe there's a world where he comes out there and that height and that reach is a problem for Makhachev, and he's able to do the traditional Garry thing where he pushes it until, the 5th round. It's a boring fight with not much going on, but he has just 4 or 5 more strikes per round, and so he's able to get it on the scorecards. Maybe I give that like a 2% chance. I think an 8% chance is him landing a good strike somewhere. Maybe a good head kick. I think the head kick's the best. Like he landed on Daniel Rodriguez, putting him, getting him out of there quick. And I think that can happen in any round. I don't think that fluctuates. He has a higher chance to do it in the beginning versus the end. But I think there's an 80% chance that this is, another signature Islam Makhachev. I'm just so much better than you, and it's not in the striking. It's going to be on the ground. I think we got very blessed with that Poirier fight with him, that it was so entertaining because you had a guy like Poirier, and I think Makhachev was also like, I need to have at least one fun fight. But with Machado, I think this is not going to be as bad as the Della Maddalena one, but almost as boring. Sure, more stuff going on, maybe more clinching against the cage, or more maybe transitioning a little bit on the ground, not just stagnant as much. But I really don't see Ian Machado Garry being able to outpoint him. I think his best chance here is really going to be some type of strike, some type of strike at range, and more than likely it's going to be a head kick. What do you think, man?
Yeah, I would kind of agree with that. Most of this kind of breakdown for me was leaning heavy Islam. Didn't see a whole lot of way that Ian was going to win this one. I love the idea of a head kick. I don't think that is out of the ordinary or out of the question, especially with him being the taller and longer fight. It's a lot easier for him to kind of whip that high kick up a little bit faster. But Islam has gotten so good with his stand-up as well.
Yes.
He's one of those who, when you compare someone like Islam versus a Khabib was a monster on the ground. He looked terrible when it came to stand-up. Islam looks very good on the feet.
Yeah, very technical.
He doesn't get hit much either. That's one of the big things. Is maybe he's not out-striking boxers that he fights, but he doesn't get hit much at all. His takedowns are obviously amazing. A lot of people are kind of, pointing towards that Shavkat fight when they're talking about Garry of like, look, he's strong against the clinch, and oh, look, he got Shavkat in a submission attempt and that kind of. Dude, you can't compare Islam and Shavkat. Shavkat was awesome. He was someone who I loved kind of watching that hype train as it built. Islam is on a different planet from Shavkat. I think this is going to be a what does Islam want to do to Ian for 25 minutes or for 2 rounds until he looks for a submission or something like that. The only way that I see this happening for Garry is, like you said, kind of a lucky shot, which is, like I said, not out of the question. You know, obviously Islam is going to be looking for a takedown or something at some point. Ian being the bigger and taller guy, you know, he might be able to time a knee or something as Islam is shooting in. Now, as long as Islam kind of shoots more like single legs with his head on the outside, he's not going to have to worry about that knee coming up the middle as much. But I see this kind of being a little bit more like a typical Islam. Grab a hold of him, clinch, get a trip, just ride on top, doing some ground and pound, look for a submission.
Yep, 100%, man, 100%. But yeah, lead us to victory in King Garry for the motherland. And please stop being corny, man. I hate it. Breaks my heart. Irish people are so cool. I'm so cool. Quit acting like this, man. Jesus. But nonetheless, let's get into the betting, man. Break down what you have for us.
Yeah, so again, this is a little bit earlier in the week, so a lot of the bet lines aren't out right now. As you see on here, I found one as an alternate method of victory, which gives you a Malik by KO TKO or the Dustin by sub. Like you kind of heard us say, Malik is probably going to win this one as a KO TKO. The only way that I necessarily see Dustin winning this is going to be by a sub. I don't see this fight going to a decision. So, you know, it is a minus 145. You can take that or leave it. I love the Charles Johnson money line, even though I picked against him on this one. Like we were saying, Johnson is one of those people that would just like randomly pop up and you'd be like, damn, where did this fighter come from? And at a plus 285, I even saw a plus 310 on one of the sports book. Not a bad bet to just kind of, you know, throw a little bit of money on that one. And then I have a money line parlay with Makhachev, Dern, and Malik again. 3 that I think are going to get it done pretty easily, and that gives you plus money when you string them all together. Some other ones that I was kind of looking at that I just didn't find the odds that I was looking for yet, but it might change as the week goes, so you guys could keep an eye out, would be an Alvarez by sub. I love that one. I think if it gets done early, it's going to be by Alvarez with a sub, and then a Turner by KO or TKO. I think that, again, if he gets it done, it's probably going to be a round 1, early round 2 by a KO TKO.
Awesome. All right, I think that's all we have for you guys. We're thinking maybe we'll do our first our reaction after this. It depends. Probably just be starting out maybe just a main card reaction. But yeah, we'll get back into it. But either way, we'll be back again next Thursday for our next week of fights. Have a good one.